A diver almost gets hit by a massive ship underwater. A low-flying plane almost cost him his life. Unbelievably lucky people get a second chance at life. Here are the 15 luckiest people caught on video. Number 15. Close call with a propeller. Divers have to be extremely careful about their surroundings to make sure they avoid dangerous underwater structures and unpredictable wildlife, all while keeping watch over oxygen levels and their depth to avoid suffering complications. While it may be easy to focus on what's in the water with you, it's equally important to be aware of what's happening at the surface too, because you could soon find yourself confronting dangers that you'd have no chance of avoiding. In 2014, a diver was in the water of the St. Clair River in Michigan when he learned this firsthand. He was helping to remove debris from the riverbed when suddenly he sensed movement above him. To his horror, when he looked up, he saw a large freighter ship sailing past with its propeller whirring frighteningly close to his head. Luckily, he had enough clearance to avoid it, but if the water had been a little shallower, it would have been a completely different story. Number 14. Almost hit by a BART train. The Bay Area Rapid Transport System is an integral way of getting around the San Francisco Bay Area and operates a fleet of autonomous trains on what is supposedly one of the safest networks in the world. Things can still go wrong, though, mainly because of human error, as this security footage from the Oakland Coliseum station shows. As a train is pulling in, someone on the platform walks perilously close to the edge. He loses his footing and falls onto the track in the path of the oncoming train, and it was only because of the quick thinking of the platform attendant that he manages to escape unharmed. He jumps to his feet and up the platform wall before being pulled to safety moments before the carriage passes by. Had he been just a fraction of a second later, he'd have been seriously injured. But fortunately, he lived to tell the tale and will likely be far more careful about crossing yellow lines in the future. Number 13. In the path of an oncoming truck. When snow falls, it can cause treacherous conditions on the road, even if it's been removed from the asphalt. It's still extremely slippery, and drivers have very little chance of quickly braking in case of an emergency. In January of 2020, a police officer was performing a routine traffic stop in Iowa when things took a horrifying turn. The police car's onboard camera caught the action on film as the officer walks to one side and calls the man over to ask him some questions. While the man's moving across the shot, a truck on the road behind completely loses control, skids off the surface, and slides through the snow straight towards him. There's only a matter of feet between it and him. The vehicle smashes into the police car, sending debris flying in all directions. The man was lucky to escape unharmed, but never revealed whether or not the cop gave him a ticket for whatever he had been pulled over for. Number 12. Low-flying plane. When you're on holiday, it's easy to become excited about everything you see and feel the need to capture it on film. This is especially true when you gain access to areas you wouldn't get close to in your home country. But it's important to remember that just because you can do something, it doesn't necessarily mean it's safe to do so. This tourist has been on a holiday of a lifetime to St. Bart's in the Caribbean and couldn't believe his luck when he realized this road over a hilltop gave a perfect view of the flight path down to the island's international airport. He thought he'd take the opportunity to film a small fixed-wing aircraft on its approach, but he got a much closer view than he had bargained for. The plane was flying so low that its landing gear misses his head by mere inches to the side of him. If it had been perfectly in line with him, there's nothing he could have done about it, because by the time he realized that he was in danger and ducks, it had already flown past. Amazingly, his natural reaction after the event is what any self-respecting photographer would do. He lifts up his camera once more and tries to capture images of the plane landing on the runway. Number 11. Shark attack. The waters of Australia are full of potentially dangerous animals, but with incidents being so rare, it doesn't stop locals from taking every opportunity they can to go surfing or swimming. Here, a group of friends have taken their boat out to drink some beers half a mile out from the Gold Coast, and one of them has gone into the water to retrieve a cage. Clearly slightly inebriated, he hits the cage down on the water, and suddenly a 10-foot-long tiger shark attacks it. The creature thrashes around in the water before swimming back into the depths, at which point the man moves as fast as he can to get back into the boat. Tiger sharks, especially when they're hungry, can cause an extreme amount of damage, and had this one not been distracted by the cage, it could have easily bitten straight through his leg, or caused an even worse injury. On this occasion, the man emerged unscathed, and the shark failed to get its meal. But next time, things might turn out more favorably for the marine predator. Number 10. Cyclist almost hit by a train. Amazingly, there are hundreds of places around the world where roads intersect with railways, and there's little more than a safety light or a siren to warn of an approaching train. But you'd at least think that where there are physical barriers that block access to vehicles, people would realize that it's not safe to cross. But there's always someone who thinks that they know better, and don't think for a moment that even if a train has passed by, there could be a reason why the barriers are still down. This video was captured at a crossing in the Netherlands, where a cyclist takes matters into his own hands and was too impatient to wait for the barriers to rise after a train went through. Of course, the reason for this was that there was another train approaching, but this seemingly didn't occur to him at all. He's halfway across the tracks when he realizes a freight train is heading straight towards him, and in a further state of madness, instead of stopping to let it through, he pedals furiously to outpace it. Luckily, he makes it with barely a moment to spare, but after seeing this footage, the local rail authority invested in a countrywide advertising campaign to heighten awareness around the dangers of unmanned crossings like these. Number 9. Near miss with a rally car. Rally car racing is a popular sport around the world, but instead of being run on dedicated circuits, they take place on closed streets, which gives spectators a chance to get much closer to the action. Usually, they take up vantage points that aren't in the line of danger. Sometimes the cars can move in unpredictable ways, and even those who are experienced at attending such events can find themselves at risk. In this video, a photographer has taken up a prime location to get the action shots he needs. But soon he found himself at the center of the story when the approaching car loses control. It swerves towards him and strikes the concrete block that he stood against. The whole left side of the vehicle is smashed to pieces, and debris flies through the air. But miraculously, the photographer stood in just the right place to avoid being hit. It would have been impossible to consciously move out of the way of a high-speed crash like that, which means that the only reason he's still alive is pure luck. Before we move on, be sure to subscribe to Top 5s with notifications on. Number 8. Superhuman crash recovery. Motorcycles are some of the most dangerous vehicles on the road, not just because drivers don't benefit from the protective shell that those in cars have, but also because their size and nimbleness often leads to bikers trying to squeeze through narrow gaps and weave through traffic so they don't have to slow down so much. One slight miscalculation can lead to a horrific accident. That is, unless you have superhuman abilities that allow you to survive what should otherwise be fatal. This dashcam footage was recorded on a highway in Russia, and as you can see, the car ahead is doing exactly what you would expect by indicating before moving into the left lane. Just as it begins to make the maneuver, a motorbike comes hurtling up the road and smashes into the back of it. The rider is sent flying through the air, but amazingly, he does a forward flip and lands on both feet on the roof of the car. The gods were clearly looking favorably down on him that day, because by all rights, there shouldn't have been a way out of this accident for him. Amazingly, no one was hurt. The driver walked away unscathed, and the vehicles behind were able to slow down to avoid the wreckage of his bike. Number 7. Lion attacks reporter. There is a fascination around the world with some people who like to keep big cats as pets. But no matter how tame they believe them to be, the truth is that these are wild animals and will always act on their instincts if they feel under threat. In this footage from 2009, a reporter from the Daily Telegraph was visiting a private zoo to write a piece on lion ownership when he was invited to the enclosure to come face to face with one of the deadliest land predators in the world. At first, the keeper was showing him how to dominate and control the lion by pushing it down onto the floor. The creature was clearly not happy with what was happening. It lashed out at its owner and then turned its attentions on the reporter. The lion wraps its front legs around him and starts trying to bite him. And it was only the way that the reporter remained calm, along with repeated slaps from the trainer, that it finally let go. When the reporter got out of the cage, the true extent of the attack became clear. His pants were torn and he had a big gash in his leg. But this could have been much more serious. The lion was most likely just playing and didn't necessarily mean to cause any harm. If, however, it had decided to properly attack, the man wouldn't have stood a chance. Number 6. Wind blowing bricks off a roof. You might have heard of chimney stacks being blown off roofs in high winds, but in 2019 a local resident had a near miss with something far more dangerous as he walked along a high street in East London. As you can see that it's quite cold, miserable, and a windy day, there's no immediate danger to any pedestrians. He passes the cafe on the other side of the street from where the camera is positioned, and no sooner does he do so than a large stack of bricks smashes into the ground in a cloud of smoke. Instead of dislodging a chimney, The winds had caused the entire roof of the building to collapse, sending debris into the street and also the interior of the cafe. Somehow, nobody was hurt, but if the man had been walking even slightly slower, he would have surely been caught up in it. Number 5. Attacked by a flying deer. When you're driving along a road, you have to be aware of all the potential hazards that might lie in your way. But no matter how alert you are, you can't account for random events that occur. And all you can do is react as calm and as safely as possible. Cyclists face an extra problem because they have very little in terms of protection apart from a helmet and specialized clothing. And if the rider in this video hadn't been so lucky, they would have been seriously injured. At first, everything seems as you'd expect as she pedals along the street with her team. But a deer suddenly runs across the road ahead of her. It goes straight into the oncoming traffic and is hit by a car traveling in the opposite direction, which sends it flying into the air and within several feet of the cyclist. With a potential weight of several hundred pounds and moving at quite some speed, if it had hit the cyclist, she would have been thrown from her bike to the ground and would have suffered serious injuries. Luckily for her, she managed to escape this outcome, and in a further astonishing outcome, the deer was able to stand up and walk away too. Number 4. Lightning strike. They say lightning never strikes twice, but even one strike is enough to cause serious injury and, at the very least, frighten you to your core. Here, an Australian couple were running down to the water at Tamarama Beach near Bondi Beach in 2016 when things were about to take a dramatic twist. They climb down the cliff and across the rocks to reach the water, and the man films his girlfriend as she approaches the edge amidst the storm that's beginning to blow across. Suddenly, there's a massive crash and a flash as a bolt of lightning strikes the ocean just in front of her, and it understandably freaks both of them out. You can hear the woman screaming in the distance, but it's the man's response that shows just how powerful and frightening an experience it was. He's unable to form any coherent words, but despite this, you can hear the sheer panic in his voice. Luckily, neither of them were hurt. But this is a perfect example of why you should never approach large bodies of water when a thunderstorm is forming. Number 3. Avalanche. Mountains are some of the most beautiful places on Earth, but with thick coverings of snow across their slopes, you have to be careful just in case an avalanche is triggered. Because if you find yourself on the receiving end of hundreds of tons of frozen ice, there's very little means of escape. In this terrifying video, a skier sets off from the peak of a mountain in Switzerland. And despite trying not to disturb too much snow, he trips, and when he lands, he dislodges a huge amount of material. He's completely covered, but begins to emerge as all of the snow passes, thinking it's all over. Unbeknownst to him, however, another mound of snow begins to start moving, and he's again swept further down the mountain along with it. Somehow he manages to safely orientate himself so he isn't pulled completely under. And on this occasion, the avalanche is fairly minor, so he's able to fight and stay on top of it. Apart from emerging in need of a hot drink and a slightly bruised ego, he was otherwise fine and was back on the slopes in just a few hours. Number 2. Giant boulder. If you've learned anything from Indiana Jones movies, it's probably that large boulders can appear out of nowhere and will try and roll over you if you don't take evasive action. You might write this off as mere fiction, but this video shows that huge rocks shouldn't be taken lightly. The dashcam footage was recorded by a vehicle traveling along the coastal road in Keelung in northern Taiwan, while a powerful storm is brewing overhead. With rain falling all around, mud and dirt suddenly starts bouncing off the cliff face to the right. It engulfs the car ahead and slides to one side of the road which, while it may seem frightening, actually proved to be the saving grace for the passengers inside. The air fills with dust, so it's impossible to see what happens next. But as it starts to clear, a giant boulder can be seen coming to rest in the middle of the road. If the car had still been where it was, it would have certainly been crushed by the weight. But luckily, it was swept to the side of where the rock ended up. Despite being totaled, with all the windows smashed, the occupants of the car were able to walk away from the incident with only a few minor cuts and scrapes. Number 1. Falling block of ice. In most places around the world, the only thing you have to worry about falling from the sky is rain, possibly hailstones, and very little else. Sometimes, though, other more deadly things can drop down from above, and there's virtually no warning that it's about to happen. This security footage was recorded in Kew in the UK in 2018, which just so happens to be beneath the flight path of planes on their approach to Heathrow Airport. With a construction worker inspecting the curb of the road and a pedestrian having just crossed over, there's suddenly a massive smash where a huge lump of ice collides with the ground. It's several feet away from the nearest person, but would have been instantly fatal if it had struck much closer to someone. In an area that rarely sees hailstones, let alone lumps of ice anywhere near that big, the most likely explanation is that it fell from the landing gears of a plane as it was preparing to land. Debris falling from jets isn't actually too uncommon, but fortunately, the chances of it hitting anyone are incredibly remote. Subscribe to Top 5s for more and check out some of our other popular videos.